Okay, so we're live.
Yay, we're doing this.
Yes,
I'm
I'm very
excited.
happy to have on my platform Amber Abundance. I have been following Amber for years now. Amber is an incredible filmmaker of the film Abundance. Amber has a Instagram channel that she often has really funny stories, that's really insightful on anti-blackness, colorism, anti-fatness, texturism, featureism, pretty much all the isms that I do. Amber goes into a deep dive, and she's just a comedic powerhouse, I would say. Do you
I
want to
would
add
say
on to like how I've introduced you?
it's funny because I just feel the same way about you. And I'm so glad that we're in like one, creating this knowledge, having this a collab. But yeah,
My
I will
first ever
say
collab as well. My first ever collab, which I'm
that
so
is
happy to
amazing. I
start it off with you.
feel great to be in the number. The only thing I'll add is I know folks get introduced to my work because of either abundance, my artwork, or Instagram, which I love. I feel like I've built such a loving, caring, expansive community on those platforms. And it has really come from the place of spending almost a decade as an organizer, and really seeing kind of like the failure or yeah, a failure of being able and being able to combine politics and creativity with like humor and like honesty and like the way we actually talk to each other, right? Like in my political organizing space, it's like you kind of had to clean it up, tighten it up a little bit to be on TV. And I really feel like I found a home in being able to build my own platforms where I'm speaking how I speak about these topics that I care so deeply about. So it means a lot to me that has over the course of time, it just started with me like, turning on that forward facing camera and talking my shit. And now it's gone to a place that, you can only really show up for. You can't plan. You can't always imagine it. So it's just really great to keep doing that with other. I feel like now we're in this space where there are a lot of dark skinned creatives talking about
Mm,
this work and it's building a body of work and knowledge. And of course, those are the things that I care about as someone who, I have a cultural studies degree. And my biggest dream was to be in politics. And I know that this is how culture shifts, is when we show up in these ways. But it's great that we just get to be ourselves because I didn't always get that ability when I was working in politics, if you know what I mean.
mm.
So yeah, that's what I will
And
add.
one of the things, I mean, first, I also forgot to include that you're an incredible writer, and you
Thank
wrote a
you.
really beautiful, you did a really beautiful interview with Kalela.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Where you talked about colorism, which was really iconic because so many pop culture people don't ever reference or address or speak to colorism. And I like that Kalila was also honest about where her proximity was
Yeah.
as well, with acknowledging featureism that
Right.
she benefits from within all of that, but still also acknowledging that she's experiencing anti-blackness.
Right. Which I mean, that's one of those things where we gotta look back at that because I feel like I tilt my hat to Kalila for one, when she was not when she was not in the public, she was very much online and
Mm-hmm.
clearly learning and taking in all these things to kind of
Mm-hmm.
seeing herself how she was being reflected in culture and taking responsibility for that, which is to me what we're asking for a lot of artists and platform people to do, is to not just come in and be like, I'm only doing this because this is what my family looks like, but what is my
Right.
responsibility now that I have so many eyes on me? And it always sucks because it's always the people who are also like experiencing the
Marginalizations, deeply
hello.
marginal. Yeah,
Like
like
we
Mona
really
Leo
got to
as
be
well.
serious. It's like there's so I for that piece with Kalila, I have written like over 3,000 words. 2,000 of them went to
Mm,
print. I think just under 2,000 of them went to print because I'm really trying to bring home this point about how colorism impacts her career, right? And the fact that she's also willing to talk about it, because I do on the back end, I'm talking to a lot of very much in the public eye dark skinned folks who know that once they start having that conversation, and we know this too, when we start talking about colorism, I can talk about being black all day long, you know? Oh, white people this, white people that, bah, 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 bah. And people be like, yes. But when I bring up colorism and fat phobia, that's when people think I'm exaggerating, specifically black people,
Mm,
right?
mm,
So I look back, that's one of my favorite things that I have written. And then I know what's on just on the Google Doc, about what she's actually experiencing and what it means for her to tap someone who gets that as well. But even in writing pieces like that, you see the resistance to getting that kind of information out. And I feel like it's not even a matter of tooting my own horn, but there's a reason why writers like me aren't staff writers,
mm,
because I could apply this to most stories. You know what I mean? Like, most of us can apply this to most things in popular culture. And that's really what it takes. And I feel like that's where folks, creatives like you come in, and Darkest Hue come in, where they're like, every time, like, we're going to point out how this, oh, you were enjoying yourself? Yes. Ooh, that nigga's a munch? Yeah, we love it. And also, you know what I mean? Oh, and this is covering because I be getting like, I like sitting in my discomfort around my love of Beyonce. I'm listening to it
mm,
all because I know it's important for me to be fucking serious. Like, be fucking for real about what's going on here. It's always a yes and that's why I feel so empowered to talk about these people. I'm not saying throw everything in the trash, but I am asking us to really examine and deal with these things that have true material consequences to folks. And sometimes
mm,
pop culture is a great I was just listening to someone on TikTok talk about how it's important to use these pop culture moments and these conversations to help us see the people in our lives.
mhm. Yeah, 100%. Because it's all like working in a circle together. Like we
Yeah.
can't separate those two things together.
Like,
Because
it's it
personally, like
sorry,
oh
go
my
ahead.
bad, girl.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say I've always been really into pop culture and like
Love it.
seeing how like seeing myself and not seeing myself.
Mhm.
Ultimately, I think like the constant search of wanting to find something that you don't find and
Yeah.
hearing people's responses to things have always been think like it creates a template, right? So like every single time a celebrity wants to disregard colorism, it creates a template for people to also know that this is something that they can also disregard. Every single
Yeah.
time that somebody wants to downplay the harms of anti-fatness, it creates a template for someone else to take that, and it just creates templates of harm if not addressed. And I think that where we are is like we are just incredibly like there's a constipation of things that we've been sitting on and being quiet
Mm.
about in society that just has not we're just sitting on shit. Like it just hasn't actually been addressed.
And to what is, like they said, what did Jennifer Lewis say? If you sit in shit for too long, you start to forget it stinks.
Exactly.
And it smells terrible. And I just am like, one of the questions I used to always get, especially when I was podcasting or about some of the things that I casually put on Instagram, is like, are you worried that you'll ever have to apologize? Or are you worried about how this will come back and impact you? And one of the things I'm very clear about is I have no problem apologizing for
Mhm.
anything, especially if it's real. Like, if I miss the mark, yeah, like, I'm a human being. I expect that to happen. That's not what my fear is. I think a lot of people ask what they are asking me is, how does this impact your trajectory as an artist? How does this impact how you're able to move and succeed in life? And the reality is, colorism and fat phobia are kind of already beating my ass. So why wouldn't I say anything? I spent the majority of my 20s in environments where there are radical like people who y'all will quote down as building your political framework. They will be the people in the documentaries from years from now who have just made my life a living hell. And I can't wait to sit up with a J and tell the truth on air, because I think what I'm trying to entice people around, which is why I think to build meaningful relationships with some of the folks that I write about or have been in community with, what I'm trying to entice people around is that your success and your freedom is actually caught up in you telling the truth.
Mm.
That you can only go as far in the world that you imagine for yourself if you clear out that shit. Like, no one wants to walk around being uncomfortable all the time. And I realized that for the first time when I like started talking about my sexuality, when I started and I
Mm.
started with my family and then put that shit online. Because even when I had the conversation with my family, I know they thought, okay, but you're still going to present in a way that feels recognizable to us. I was like, oh no, no,
Mm.
absolutely not. I'm letting y'all know so y'all don't have to click in and find out. But I fully plan on embodying all of myself. And I think the reality is a lot of people are living very, very uncomfortable lives. And whenever they see you on here with like your hair freeform, or they see you talking how you talk, they see us folks like me wearing like little things, wearing short skirts, wearing
Mm.
shorts in a big body, and being okay with calling myself that because it is a truth, honey. I'm also 5'11", so what's up? So it's like when people see you embodying that, they realize the ways in which they haven't accessed that for themselves. And you start to interrogate, why am I abandoning myself and for who? And I think I've
Mm.
existed long enough on this planet to understand that, like, wow, some of us are really building out who we are in the world based on other people who are lying about who they are in the world.
Mm. Yes.
So, like, let's talk about it. What I want to look back, I don't want to look back at this time and be like, oh, I was afraid to say all this shit. Like,
Exactly. I mean, I've spent so
why?
many years of my life like that. Like, I'll
I've
never
already
forget.
done it.
I always remember, like, because I think we're probably like in a similar age range, but I remember when the song, what is it? I'm looking for a yellow bone, long hair.
Mm-hmm.
I remember being in
And now it's
college.
back.
But also, listen, the way that that era had so many songs about people being light skinned,
And red
like the
bones.
way that there was Yellow by Gucci, because I'm from the South, so Yellow for like Yellow by Gucci, like there was, or Lemonade, sorry, like there
Yeah.
was so many songs reinforcing something. And I felt like, I remember one time saying to my friend, like, who was not a friend, I'm realizing, but I remember being like, isn't it weird that they always just like point out light skinned people and they're like, it's a preference? But they were saying that with such confidence that you should
Yeah.
accept that. While now I think that people still have that same sentiment,
Mm-hmm.
but the way that they word things is completely different. I think people are now realizing that colorism is something that they don't want to be linked to and attached to, and are trying to remove themselves from that core. But I don't really think that they're actually changing their mind about it. I think they're just trying to become more like politically correct around speaking on it.
Yeah, because it is very much giving a default setting. And that's what I reference a lot. I'm like, we were going through hell in the 90s
In the 2000s,
and the early 2000s.
in the
Like,
late
it
ones too,
was.
child.
But now they gotta fight us, and I think that's the difference. Like,
Mm.
there are people in culture who are like, actually, no, you're gonna talk to me about this. Like, you think you're just gonna do an interview with Mona Leo and she's not gonna bring it up, and she does. You know what I mean?
Mm.
So I feel like once you've gone through, like, as a young person, the 106 in Park Air, like the colorism, like I just knew I was
The tip
ugly.
drill era,
Oh my God, y'all will
the misogyny and the colorism.
the misogyny and the colorism. And then like there was nothing in media to counteract it. Like
Yo.
it was just happening. Like I remember when Nelly went to Spelman and those black girls were like, they protested him and his sister was sick. He was doing like a blood drive or something. They were like,
Mhm.
actually, no, nigga. Like the images that you put out in the world are so terrible. And I remember the media being like, how awful of them.
Yes. My sister was
And
at
I,
Spelman that year.
how awful of them to protest Nelly when he needs us. And I'm just like, and now you see it too, because I feel like I got online. Um, you know, yeah, a big reason why I was never on YouTube is because my interaction with YouTube for a very long time
Mm.
were the hate videos. Like I was going on air once
That
a
was
week to do the
so
news,
bad.
and these hotel they wouldn't even have their face on camera. They would make these
Things.
hour-long
Yeah.
videos about how I was a black provocateur. I was an ugly dyke. This is before I realized I really was a
Mhm.
dyke. And they would just, I mean, there were so many of them. These were people who would describe themselves as pro black. And I remember one time they would use the shit emoji for me. And
Mm.
I'm like, how are you pro black literally calling me a piece of shit? Like,
And I would even argue that you had it even harder because that was before you can even report people's videos. Like, you know how
oh
now, like,
my God.
there's some element of like if you're getting bullied on YouTube, there's some things that you can do. But your time that people were attacking you was like the wild, wild west of
Yeah.
YouTube.
And then on top of that, because I was very much a part of the political establishment, I was doing reproductive justice work. I was doing some Black Lives Matter work. Like I was in there, and I would ask these Black communications professionals, I'm like, what should I do? And they were like, this is just what it is. And
But they
I'm
weren't going through that same level of
no,
they
and
weren't.
they were not. There's no way they could have because they weren't saying anything. Like I was going on every time, putting it on the floor.
Mm,
And just the response that I got was I needed to tighten up my talking points, that I needed to be more clear. And I'm like, I am stating a fact about how this was before Me Too, right? And I
mhm,
was talking about rape and sexual assault, specifically of Black women and who that's coming from. This was before R. Kelly went to trial. This was before
mhm.
all of that media was starting to come up around these folks. And it's just like, there was no protection. And I would have these conversations like, what can we do? Now I know that it would have been nothing for someone to launch a communications plan that just simply said protect Amber. It would have been
Mm.
it would have been that simple.
But the reason they didn't is because people see the dark skinned people as easy to dispose of
Yes,
and easy to find, even though like they are probably using you for a lot of things.
right.
But one thing I've learned across the board, it doesn't matter like what organization or even friend group or even political party. Like
Child.
the dark skinned person is always the quickest person to be disregarded from a friend group if push comes to
You
shove and
if
they
you
have to
make a
just accept that.
mistake, if you do something very human, you're out of there, buddy. Like that's what it's so I think that's what I hope conversations like this complicate. Like
Mm,
people will literally paint you as a bully. They will paint you as a mean and angry when you're just simply stating what your experience is. But then
mhm,
they're completely unable to see that, or it's not even a question. And I'm always talking about Black spaces, right? If I'm ever talking about white spaces, I will give us a trigger warning. Okay. I'm talking about niggas. All right. In those spaces, it's like it's completely disregarded if you are light skinned, if you are not as fat, or if you are like desirable. You're allowed to be whatever you want to be. You can
yeah.
be unpleasant. You can literally be out of integrity.
You can
You
say
can
many
be
things that are
harmful.
offensive.
You can be offensive, and you will not only keep your job, you will continue to be promoted on a trajectory. Like
And then you can redeem yourself in a way where you don't lose opportunities because
at
colorism is
all.
never like seen as a serious enough offense to cancel somebody or to divest interest in them. And you
No.
can remarket yourself talking about colorism, even though you know you've been harmful without apologizing to people.
And that brings us to Amanda Seales. Honestly, that's a great segue. You can literally remarket and repackage it up as if you did not. This is the theme. Like I want to make sure because I'm experiencing that now that I have left my political organizing background.
Mhm.
And again, I'm always going to draw back to the dark skinned creators who have forced this conversation where now, in order to talk about feminisms, right? In order to play like you care about queerness, in order to play like you care about black women and trusting them or what have you have to have conversations around colorism, right? Even in the interviews, I lived when The Harder They Fell came out, and they had to ask Zazie Beetz about colorism. There is a world in which, because we lived through it, where that would have never happened, right?
Never, and it wasn't happening for us while we were growing up.
Exactly. When what's that Lin Manuel Miranda movie that came out, In the Heights? When In the Heights came out, they had to be asked about colorism,
Yeah.
right?
In which
This
they
is
didn't even have a formulaic response because they were so
completely
unprepared to
unprepared.
have to discuss anti-blackness. Like they didn't even, I mean, none of them seemed to have any kind of formulaic thought of how to address it. I feel like they have been coasting for years,
Oh
never
yeah.
discussing colorism and silencing people and blocking people and disregarding people who do talk about colorism. They've spent years doing that. Amanda Seals.
Yeah. And we see you. You gotta wake up real early in the morning to get over on us because of how much we have gone through. You know what I mean? And I don't know if you want to set this up. Do you want to set it up or should I set it up?
I mean, we can be back and forth.
Okay, we can go back and forth. But it's like I'm seeing how whenever it's kind of like the videos about white people not washing their legs, how those always get they're very popular, or white people cooking badly. It's very popular content. In black spaces, having a conversation about colorism is very popular. It's click worthy, it's
Yeah.
retweetable, it's shareable.
Yeah.
People are clearly interested in the conversation, right?
Yeah.
And that's because again of who has been pushing this, right? This is a moment where if I'm in my narrative research bag, it's a cultural trimmer. Like it's something that is now starting to take precedent in culture. Like it's becoming a source of conversation, kind of like women rapping or queer folks
Mm,
rapping, right? This is a thing that we can no longer, it was always a thing, but now we really can't ignore it. But we can point back to kind of who started those conversations, like the fact that the first hip hop album that won a Grammy belonged to Lauryn Hill, right? It wasn't
mhm.
a black man. It never was a black man. So I digress. What we're seeing now, and it's so obvious that Amanda Seales is trying to reintroduce, trying to make popular content, right? She needs her clicks and retweets. And she's doing so by having these conversations about colorism because she can no longer just have it about racism, right? It's not as popular. We're getting nuanced, right? We're getting deeper. And one of the things that Amanda Seales, raise your hand if Amanda Seales has blocked you on Instagram. Right. She literally went on a blocking spree of folks who are experts in talking, not just talking about colorism, but making content
Yeah.
about colorism. Right.
And during the height of 2020 as well, right?
Sitting in the house trying to avoid COVID. You're like, you
And
know who I need to
colorism.
block? These dark skinned bitches who mention it. But now we're literally seeing her on YouTube rebuild her platform based on having terrible, ahistorical, dry toast milk conversations about colorism.
Yeah.
And I can't see it on Instagram, right? Because I'm blocked. But what came up on my YouTube was the conversation she had with a comedian whose Instagram handle is literally "Don't call me white girl." A white passing black person from Philly, who we all like laugh and joke and kiki with. She's very funny, right? It's interesting that you won't have this conversation with people who literally put you onto the fact that we're having it because you have erased them from your source of information, your source of research, which I think is very important for us to mention for Black people specifically, because Amanda Seales also presents in culture as someone who is pro-Black, who's
Mhm.
telling the truth, and she's the real one in the situation. That's why white folks don't trust her, because Amanda Seals is keeping it 100. But literally, she has a huge point of contention when it comes to the blackest of black people.
Yeah. I mean, even how everything started. Like, I remember Erica Hart, who's also an incredible pioneer on speaking on anti-blackness, on speaking on
Hmm.
colorism, on speaking on just many things. I remember she had made a post talking about how Beyonce benefits from light skin privilege, benefits
Hmm.
from colorism,
Hmm.
which anyone who has critical thought can be able to acknowledge that you can enjoy Beyonce's music and acknowledge that she also benefits from colorism. But Amanda Seals decided to say to Erica that she needs to cut that shit and that she essentially just going to just say no, like that's not right, and going back and forth. And through that, uh Erica got blocked, Darkest Hue got blocked. I wrote, this was really, I wrote my own piece, I got blocked. We all
Yeah.
got blocked in the series of a day where
I
then
made
she
a
went to
joke.
go.
I was like, this is Amanda Shields showing up to tell dark skinned people to shut the fuck up.
I'll
Blocked.
find that meme. That was the funniest meme. And and then she proceeded to say, like, more or less, allegedly, she proceeded to say, which I'll probably put up the video,
Yes.
that white people can't tell a difference between a light skinned person and a dark skinned person because then they were all black, which is a really problematic on so many fronts. Like, saying this is colorist, saying that white people, like, who do you think created colorism?
Do you think they are the pioneers of white supremacy, or what they are trying to enact as white supremacy? White people are very colorist. That's why our actors look the way they do. They know the difference between a dark bitch and a light skinned one, and they choose the light skinned one over and over again. You've now gotten to the point where, like, white people are excited because of all the work that they've done around colorism and honoring lighter skinned people. They're even getting excited about making light skinned children.
100%.
They love that
The people
shit.
who, yes, some people say, "Oh, I can't wait to have a mixed race child."
I am looking for there. I am
And even
looking
if you want to get
forward.
statistics about it, even if you want to get statistical about it, like, even if you look at adoption adoption agencies and how dark skinned children are the least adopted children, and how a lot of mixed race people and light skinned people are one of the, like, I need to find the charts, but one of the most desirable people for adoptions.
Yeah, white people are pioneering this work in the direction of eugenics. And if black people are not aware of this, specifically light skinned people are not, and biracial people are not aware of it, they also promote it. They're promoting a type of eugenics, right? Here in LA, there's a billboard for mixed chicks, which, how is that on the
Mm.
counters, right? It doesn't
And has
say
been there for decades. Let's start
since the
there.
natural hair shit popped
Yeah,
off, it has been
yeah,
available in Target, right?
yeah.
There's a billboard with a mixed race, curly haired person on the billboard, and it says mixed chicks, a cultural evolution, not revolution, evolution. They said this is where we're going, babes.
And you know what's, like, really upsetting about that? When I, like, talk about texturism and I say, like, oh, like a mixed hair texture or like a mixed race person, people love to say, like, not all mixed race people have that hair texture, which I very much so know this. But what about when mixed chicks is using that language? Like, people aren't going to say, well, not all mixed race people, people aren't going to advocate against them and how problematic that is as a title, and to call themselves an evolution. People aren't arguing that because we should accept that that's a normal thing. That's normal behavior.
Right. And it makes me question where people's sensitivity around anti blackness by way of colorism is, and why it isn't as intense of our as our sensitivity around racism enacted by white
Mm.
people, because it has the same impacts, right? It has the same
Mm.
eugenics impact, it has the same genocidal impact, it has the same oppressive impact, that we do not have this sensitivity as a people around colorism. And I'm just like, what will it take for us to really trigger our love for Black people who are the most impacted by our society's obsession with anti Blackness? Because
Mm.
if we can't understand that the darkest among us are suffering the most, which I hate taking that entry point in, but for folks like Amanda Seals, they're like, well, the justification of all this is like, we need to stick together because we're dying, or we need to stick together because we deserve better, or we need to stick. But what I'm also telling you is like, okay, if you really believe that, why wouldn't you rush to the defense, to the care, to the practice of protecting the darkest among us if we know that anti Blackness is harming us so deeply, right?
If you really
Why isn't it
cared
important
about
for us
that,
to create solutions around that shit?
if you really cared about trying to tackle anti-blackness, why would you block all the dark-skinned people who are trying to talk to you about colorism?
Literally. Only to reemerge. And let's be very clear, Amanda Seals is trying to reemerge as a expert on colorism and ethnicity and race. How do we know this? You can literally look at her last set of YouTube videos and see what's
Mm.
happening. Meanwhile, this person is entering into the conversation off of the weight of blocking the people who have built the frameworks
And who have been speaking about it for a really long
for a
time,
long
and who were
time.
dealing with your followers attacking us online because you wanted to take someone's post and talk about how stupid you found it. If you were really even, and the thing that's so interesting to me, like I hear things I don't agree with all the time, but like I'm not going to like. I think it's interesting what we choose to destroy and destruct, and why
What
like if
makes us
I
pipe up?
pipe up, and it's like I feel like when I talk about colorism, I feel like I have to be so careful with my language and how I
Mhm.
say it and the tone of how I say it because of how easily it's misconstrued. Let me be
Mm.
wrong one time and I will know. You will never see me. I will not let up. People will tell me for days that I'm wrong. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And that wrongness will also be indicative of me being incompetent, which is really
Mm.
off of that anti-blackness, because I know that's something that you can relate to, something I can relate to, is people often want to try and teach me about blackness. Teach me about being dark skinned. People will say to me, don't you know that light skinned black people exist? Why would I
Oh
not
my
know that?
God. I
Why would
did
I
not.
not know that? What? What?
But if you,
Never seen
when,
them.
sorry, I'm listening.
And then it's like, and then they want to also teach me and say, well, dark skinned people need to love themselves. And then you guys will. So it's like always constantly being put that the energy, that the reason that we're here is because of our lack of competence, our lack of knowing that light skinned people exist. And if I say, like, oh, this person isn't black, you're trying to teach me why, or teach me about slavery, or teach me about colonialism, as if I don't know that, as if I didn't grow up in the States, I didn't grow up in the South, as if like the shambles that I see when I go to Nigeria isn't directly linked to colonialism, isn't directly
Right.
linked to slave trade, of how it has completely plummeted the entire continent off of theft, off of sexual assault that people like to throw so willy-nilly into these discussions as if that's not a factor put
Mhm.
in with colorism. I'm very aware of how sexual assault works.
Which there's another clip about Amanda Seals using that as the entry point to talk about colorism. But I'm like, do you, so you just want to skip over the person who was sexually assaulted?
I always say that. Thank you.
Do you know what that person looked like? That's goofy as fuck. I don't even know if I could cuss. Am I? We can bleep this out,
Yeah,
but
I'm gonna bleep it.
okay. That's really wild for you to think that and to say that shit out loud. You're like, what about me? The product of, okay, what about me? You know what I mean? It's just, and I have this conversation too about like, oh my God, when we even start to get into the Caribbean and Latin America and like
Mm,
just the lies that Latino folks are telling about color.
the white ones.
The white ones are the media, the culture they are putting out
It's
that they
wild.
all look like J Lo, bitch, is really
And also that they're in
it's
a
sick.
post-racial world, post-colorist world, because I think that was my biggest disconnect as well. Is I always knew like the way that people have always like you remember when I don't know, this is what my brain does. Remember when like Victoria's Secret models were coming out and like a lot of them were all Brazilian and they all were kind of just white with brown hair, I guess, but they had green eyes and stuff. And people were I remember people saying this is what Brazilians look like. This is literally what all Brazilians look like. Like, and even when the whole like BBL culture started, right? Brazilian
Hmm.
butt lift. This is what
Yeah.
Brazilians just look like. They all just look like this, right? But it's like you're erasing the racial element every single time from like these discussions. And I just always thought that Brazil was a really like post colorism because everyone makes it seem like it's everyone's so mixed that you
Yeah.
forget that black people actually exist. And I'll
Indigenous
never,
people, they're not even speaking like it's just
yeah,
it will make you glitch when you really start to do the
yeah.
research about how this is just like a organized effort.
Yeah, and I always say like when I learned that dark skinned people existed in Brazil when I was talking to this one boy and he was from Brazil, he's a white boy, and he's like, "You look just like the lady who raised me." And I
Well,
said, "I'm so sorry." And he's like, "Yeah, the lady who raised me looks just like you." And that's when I was like, "Oh my God, they are hiding. They're literally hiding their dark skinned population." Okay, not hiding. I don't want to make it seem like dark skinned
they
Brazilians aren't.
but they kind of are like unless you get the passport stamp and go for yourself. Like if we can understand that you reference modeling, there's I love watching these documentaries about I don't know why I'm just like obsessed with black models right now, like how that happened.
Mm.
And there's this I'm blanking on her name. Hopefully it will come back to me. But there's just this dark skinned black woman who was a pioneer. She started off as a model and then she built a model agency. Ooh, I hope her
Oh.
name comes to me. I'm gonna search it when I'm done saying this so I don't lose my point. But there was a moment where like Naomi Campbell, there was just all the Beverly Johnson, there were all these black models and they were eating the runway up, of course. Because if we're being honest, like the real like a lot of white models, they just wear the clothes like they're the hanger, like they're the hangers with
Mhm.
legs. That's how, and that's because there's a lot of patriarchy and just white supremacy in that system, right? Of who can sell clothes and who can't. But of course, these black models were entering the chat. They were going out of their way to find them. And then because when the models walked in these clothes, that's really when you see the birth of the supermodel, right? Their
Mhm, mhm.
personalities were kind of like taking over the designer. They were taking over the fashion to be about them as well. People
Yeah,
became
yeah, yeah, yeah.
curious
I
about
saw that.
all these black women. And then like the next year, they got rid of all of them, right? And
Yeah.
this started with companies like Prada. And one of the things that they cite about what happened with that was the fall of the Berlin Wall, right? So they could now have access to all these girls from Europe. They had these European models, and yeah, exactly. So they started walking them down the runway, right? And then the black models were just gone, right? there wa- I'm trying to point out how organized these efforts are, that people are making
Mm.
these decisions about who we get to see and who we don't get to see, right? This is also happening with colorism.
Mm.
Light skinned folks are organized about who they want to see and who they don't want to see. But then, like, and this is coming directly from our conversations. But then by the time that trickles down to people who look like us, you want me to believe that we're all black. Meanwhile, I missed the meeting because I wasn't invited, where you decided that I was a different type of black, that I was a black that had to
Mm.
operate by a different set of rules. And this is also, and I use Amanda Seales as an example again, because I'm not talking about someone who doesn't talk about race. I'm not talking about something that doesn't position themselves as being someone who studies history and culture, right? Like that person, like we would have to catch them up. We would have to do a lot of work to catch them up to the conversation that we're having.
Mhm, mhm.
So I'm starting there because I want to also name, a lot of people think that I think there are folks who think that my entry point to talking about colorism comes from media representation. It does not. It comes from the colorism that is present in specifically Black organizing spaces, where we are
Yes.
literally there to create solutions beyond the imagination of white people, right? Even though they're funding the bitch, right? My entry point to talking about colorism and fat phobia is from my own two eyes
Mm.
of seeing colorism play out in spaces where we are literally responsible for teaching society about how to advocate for Black folks. The communications teams are filled with light skinned people. The EDs
Mhm.
are light skinned people, literally the people who are tapped on to speak to the Black experience by way of the oppression that we are collectively experiencing, are the folks who are not getting the brunt of that oppression.
And I would even say that that's a global issue as well, because I feel like
Absolutely.
everywhere around the world, a lot of people who are leading discussions on Blackness are people who are either mixed race or light skin.
And y'all can get that in 2020 when you realize how many white people were holding positions of diversity and inclusion, right? Because what the fuck? So why wouldn't you understand that when it comes to colorism? And this is why Rachel Dolezal was sitting up at the NAACP.
Yeah, yeah. Jessica
Sit
Krug.
a leadership role. Let me tell you
Mhm.
what I had to do to get a leadership role as a actual
Mm.
nigga in political organizing spaces. The amount of work that I had to do, the how expansive I had to be, how like you're saying, how like right you have to be all the time, how well studied, how well spoken, how well dressed, right? You have to be all the time to get people to listen to what the fuck you're saying. So it's like I started to realize that the barriers that I was up against wasn't solely like Becky and them, because I was experiencing this resistance when Becky was not around, when white people were not around. And I think it's so important for us to stop being so ahistorical and realize that this is a theme specifically in Black organizing spaces. Since we're talking about W.E.B. Du Bois. The NAACP, whenever you see them represented in movies about that time, when we talk about like Bessie Smith, you know,
Mhm.
they're seen as fried, dry, and laid to the side because it was a bunch of light skinned people running that work,
Mhm.
dictating our political knowledge, dictating our blueprints for organizing. How out of a organization called the Black Panthers do y'all only know the names of Elaine Brown and Angela Davis? How? That is intentional.
Yeah. And then the people who actually are either brown or dark skinned, because I always wonder how dark skinned women felt about the Black Panther Party.
Right.
Like I can't even find anyone to like ask or reference point. Like I can't even personally, I can't even name anyone. I don't know if you can name anybody dark skinned that's a woman that was a part. But I just wonder, especially with all the sexual assault that was going on in the
Right.
parties, like, and then also with people who are like lighter speaking on, like, I'll never forget that clip of Kathleen Cleaver talking about texturism when I see her hair texture now. And she clearly just had to backcomb her hair into a fro because her hair is not naturally an afro, and how when she's speaking on it, like there's dark skinned people in the background. And I'm like, I want to hear you talk about what it's like.
Hello.
She was standing in front of dark skinned people talking about loving our black features. And I just feel like that would be a good moment to move out the way.
Mm.
And so I just think that there's an intentionality of erasing of dark skinned people. And I know that this is kind of the pessimist in my mind, but I often think about how I will be erased in the same way.
Oh my gosh. Oh my it this is the part that always makes me so emotional,
Mm,
because what I know for sure is that even from my personal experience, that even these people who are tapped to have these conversations have been in conversations with people who look like us, right? And then it takes a certain amount of loyalty, not even loyalty, it's like integrity, intellectual integrity, political integrity. It costs nothing to name who
Yeah.
influenced your
Yeah.
thoughts around this. And it makes a world of difference while we're alive in terms of resources and funding.
Mm.
But time and time again, I watch people kind of push us to the back. Earlier this week, I was so deeply triggered because in light skinned folks doing this kind of rebranding of, oh, I was called out by colorism. I don't want to be in right relationship with the person who actually taught me that or who had that conversation with me. I'm now going to hop over that person and find another dark skinned person to do that work. Right. And it's so harmful because I know like on the like a lot of our content is very entertaining, it's fun, it's cute, it's lighthearted, but we both know how much work we're putting in, right?
Mm.
We both know the pull it has on us. And I would this is assumption I'm making, it's like you get to the point where you're talking about this because it's like I cannot suffer in silence anymore. I know that I'm not alone in this experience. And for these folks to say that they care about Black people to then add on to that erasure that is already so possible for darker skinned people is just it's nasty business.
Yeah.
It's nasty work. It's very nasty work because we're sitting here saying, both of us are like, who there had to be ancestors, there had to be thought leaders who were talking about this. Where
Who
are
looked like
they?
us? Who
Who
looked like
look like
us?
us? Where were their book deals?
Mm.
Where were their endowment chairs? Where are they? Because you're not going to tell me that we had this whole political movement and the only person you got on a hot mic talking about my Black is beautiful
Has blue eyes.
bitch, move out the way and show me the nigga that you stole that from. Like,
Yes.
please move and show me that person.
And something that I think is so interesting is just like I don't know how to say this too because I went to Clark Atlanta, so W.E.B. Du Bois is like he's
Child.
champion.
They passing
I just
around
think it's
that souls of Black folks.
yes.
Yeah.
I just think the ways that like colorism isn't even really brought up for real when people speak about him. I didn't know about I went to that school. I didn't know about W.E.B. Du Bois being colorist until I did my own research outside of university.
Right.
Why isn't that the starting point of him? Because people see colorism as just a casual mistake. It's like I bumped my
Oops.
toe. Oops. Spilt some water on grass. It's not a big deal. I'm gonna keep pushing.
Oh, it's because there were no dark. It's because Lena Horne was the most
Mm,
talented person. It's because there's
mm,
always all these excuses, and I feel like that, and we know not to make that mistake with white supremacy, and it's in the fact that it's organized. Why are we making that mistake in Black spaces? It makes like you must know that this is as much as y'all think about narrative and communications and spokespeople, so on and so forth. You chose that light skinned bitch. Sorry, you chose that
mm.
light skinned person to be the face of this. Like I was thinking I finally listened to that Pharrell gospel Louis Vuitton song.
Joy or something like that.
Yeah. Following his men's fashion, he's the new creative director of Louis Vuitton.
Mhm.
And I'm like, wow, they got everything they wanted out of that nigga. Even down to a gospel song sung by a big Black
Right, and
woman.
wasn't the like but the people who were modeling were not Black, right? I think I saw someone
And
show an image
hardly
of how
any
like
of the people behind the making of that moment were Black folks, right? And I'm like, they got everything they wanted without the attitude. And that's
without
what
what
a
really
lot of y'all,
caused without what really brings what it's actually birthed from.
without any of the tumultuous pain, like they got everything they wanted without having to rub up against Black conflict.
Mm.
The clothes are inconsequential. They got hip hop legends in the front row. They got the hottest black people out present in the number. The clothes, that's an added bonus. And that's what people are doing to us. They're like,
Mm.
we want all that energy, right? We want
But
all
without
those
you.
vibes. We want all that dark nigga, that dark nigga stuff. But please, can you keep your ass at home unless you are not going to talk about any of that? Thank you so much.
Mm.
Purchase our bag here.
Yeah. I mean,
And
it's
there's
really, I
so
mean,
many spaces where that's happening.
literally, literally. And it has been happening for a long time
A
and has
long
been
time.
exclusionary for a long time. It's weird because it's like in the past, like I just think all the time about how like you're made to feel like dark skin is a thing of the past.
Oh my gosh.
And like
A
with the
cultural
active like
evolution.
and like with the active like promotion of people intermarrying and being mixed race, and it just makes you feel like, yeah, like dark skin was, it just doesn't, it's not supposed to be existing anymore.
Yeah.
And also another thing I wanted to quickly say too is like, you know, with people like Amanda Seals, and I'm even sure I would even categorize W.E.B. Du Bois in the same ship. I feel like they felt like addressing racism was more pressing than addressing colorism. And I think that they've said things along the lines that kind of makes you feel like racism is a bigger issue than colorism. So when you address the racism, the colorism will follow. And I always just think it's so interesting because when I talk to my best friend and she's Nigerian and she's like, I knew I was dark skinned before I knew I was black. Like I've been seeing skin whitening products to me as a child before I was even seeing a white person. I knew what light skin privilege gave me would give me if I was to try to change my complexion more than I would understand. So if when we are in black organizations, as you've said, you've worked in black orgs and you are seeing that it's very colorist, what makes you think that addressing racism would fix that? When we are
Right.
with each other, we're not even, the harm is continuous. And for us as dark skinned people, we have to pick an option between going to white spaces where we are seen as invalid and we're not understood, and then going to black spaces where we will be the darkest person there
Ugh.
and seen as unattractive, seen as undesirable, seen as, and in both spaces. And then the third one that we both add is the queerness element.
Ooh. You're rocking my
It's a story of isolation.
it is a deep story of isolation. I just did I last year I was in this project with Meta, and it was all these black creators, and I went in so hopeful, like, yes, camaraderie. And like as soon as I stepped foot on the Zoom, I was like, oh, that's right, I'm dark skinned and I'm a dyke.
Mm,
Either I will have to overperform or I will become a supervillain, or I can just choose to be quiet.
it's always those three.
It's always those three, no matter what. I did another thing. It was a writer's retreat. Boy, we were talking we were talking about
That
this.
one's bad, Amber.
Literary writers, the colorism in the literary world, the caramel macchiato
Nah,
skin
they need to
tones,
get dealt with. They need to, because
they
people think
need
writers are all soft. Oh, I'm reading, reading, writing, writing. I'm shy. No, you're colorist too, and you need to be dealt with for that.
they need to be dealt with
Especially the fantasy
because
writers. Even their own fantasy is colorist. Even with all of the constraints gone, you want a world where dark skinned people don't exist.
you're literally giving people a way into using their imagination. They don't even have a visual in front of them on how to not see us. The literary work, I will never. It's almost this is so bad that it becomes humorous to me. Of course, this is
Mm.
why we're both very very funny, right? Because we had like in these sessions during this writers retreat, it was all on Zoom. We would have like showcase, right, where you get up and read your work, and the poetry. It'd be the poetry people too. They be the people who write poetry be so
Nah, they're sick.
colorist.
They're
I'm so
sick.
sorry I'm yelling, but it's like
Nah, they're
it was
sick.
like writer after writer after writer. Like it just all the work when they went to go describe skin tone, it just read like a dessert table. Like the amount
Chocolate.
of caramel, the amount of
Chocolate.
cinnamon hued,
Dark.
my like I was like, where are
Macchiato.
we right now? But then when it came to dark people, it gave tar. Tar? You looked at a dark skinned person and you saw concrete, you saw cement,
Or dirt. Just simple. Like not even the
simple
compliment.
dirt, bow, boom, pow, dirt. And I'm just like, meanwhile, again, these are spaces where there is literally a code of conduct that everyone has to agree
Mm,
to because we're all people of color about how we will not perform transphobia. We will
mm.
not perform all these things. We will not do this.
But
We will
colorism is
not
never
use
listed.
ableist language. We will not,
But colorism is never listed on that list. I said
honey.
that one's okay. A little bit of that
You
one.
know, a little bit of
Sprinkled
that
it.
just for a little razzle dazzle, like just for a little, you got to write. Like when I say there was hella resources on words you can use beyond crazy, there so much colorism. And I'm just like at the point, this is why, around a lot of this, I feel like as creators, and I'm not saying this is the case for everybody, but I feel like as an artist, as a writer, I have to pick up my work, right? And I'm like, oh, y'all, it's messed up that y'all expect that from me. But you
Mm,
know what? Okay, I got it. I got it for me. If no one, if I will, this, I'm really in like digging into self pleasure and what does it mean to build sexuality beyond who you're partnered with and who you're having sex with. That's where my brain is
mm,
right now. And I've been getting readings, like really doing some deep dive work on with myself around it because I have this narrative that was, rightly placed on me by society of like, no one cares about me. No one's going to fight for me. No one's going to do this. This is why I get emotional around like erasure because one of the reasons why my best friend is my best friend, I used to always quote the story of how Alice Walker brought Zora Neale Hurston into our public discourse, right? She went
mhm.
looking for her grave and marked her
Yeah.
grave, really did that work so that we have access to their eyes were watching God. We have access to that literary canon. And I'm just like, man, I always had this joke of like, somebody gonna have to go searching for my grave. And my friend just
Mm,
looked at me. She was like, Quayla is really good at this about like getting behind some of my humor. And she's like, I will never let that happen to you. And this is someone who has never worked for a political organization.
mm.
Like that's what
Like she sees your worth more than the people who you were along the sidelines with, the front
easily,
lines, really.
easily. She came to protest. She came like Quayla's been in it. She works in higher ed, honey. Does diversity work? Like, cause jobs. Yeah. And she is. That's why I'm like, as long and it's important to me because that's work that I would of course want my family to do, but they also haven't been in this experience with me the same way Quayla has.
Mm,
And that's a deep kind of love. That's a deep kind of caring and accountability that we have with each other of like, as long as I am breathing, you will not be forgotten. I will be able to name your
mm,
impacts. And that's kind of like that tells me how meaningful the work is that's why I'm so focused on communicating. I feel like when I was in politics, you're kind of talking to each other, but I'm
mm,
so committed in I need to make this accessible to people who will never have really the privilege of being a full-time organizer,
mm. True.
right? I want to make this accessible to the folks who are in these churches, the folks who are working at Amazon to know that like this is not You don't have to accept any of this as normal. There's absolutely ways that you can fight for what you need on your block, even if it's just in your own family, which is where a lot of us
Mm.
are learning colorism, right? Like
First
that you
places.
have the language to stand up for yourself in the face of your mama.
Mm.
So it's like, I didn't forgot where I was before, but that, oh, I have to pick up my work. So if what y'all feel like y'all need is somebody, or what I feel like is missing is literally language, is narrative, is um how do we actually start to interrupt the kind of like obsession with anti-blackness, the default that we go to when it comes to anti-blackness. If that world needs to be created, if that work needs to be done, I'm down to do it, because
Mm.
nobody is going to fight harder for me than me. I got that for myself. And that's what all of my art, that's what all of my work is based on, is seeing myself as central.
Instead of on the sidelines or like the best friend or
Period.
the. And that's why I'm also really excited about you starting your YouTube channel and branching into having like a more concrete place for you to hold your work, because you give so much. And I just feel like your experiences, you're just like, honestly, you're one of the most like prolific people on the internet to me.
Oh my
Not even just on the
gosh.
internet, but you know what I'm saying, just like voices right
Yeah.
now, like you just yeah, you have it. Like you have it.
Mm,
Your film is incredible.
thank you
Your
so
humor
much.
is top tier. And I know that that humor is top tier because the depth of feeling that you've experienced is so deep that the humor has to come from that same
Has
place.
to. You gotta make sense of it. And it's just,
Mm,
I just want to say again, it just feels so timely. It feels like this conversation that we're having around like who were our ancestors talking about this. The fact that I can see like this coalition building, and it's really healing to me coming out of organizing spaces, because a lot of that shit was
mm,
traumatic. But like this coalition building of people who are committed to having these conversations,
mhm.
especially around colorism, through gender, through sexuality. Like it's very dreamy. And I just know that, like, as much as my best friend is like my backup to not being forgotten, I will not allow folks like you to be
I
forgotten.
was
Like,
gonna say the same thing. I was literally
I'm
gonna say the same thing
referencing.
about you. I'm gonna reference you every single time. I'm gonna
You
reference
have
you every
such a
single time.
beautiful body of work. Like, even you have fundamentally even helped me around like child, that's a whole other story. Like, you have fundamentally helped me around explaining texturism specifically for people with
Mm,
locks.
mm.
And now you're seeing that too, like texturism that made its way over the locks, child. Like, it's really bad. People want that loose end. um
And the baby hair and the glue. Have you seen like the one that they glue it to their head, like the lace front? One thing about us though, we're like wildly creative.
Very much
But you
so.
know what? You know what? You know what? Actually, this is off topic, and we're probably gonna like we can wrap up. But I was gonna
Hmm.
say, you remember this woman? I don't know her name, and she had alopecia, and she was showing how she glues like weaves to her hair to create these like really intricate ponytails and
Uh-huh.
buns. And do you remember her?
Mm-mm. I need to
So
see
she was
it.
like always gluing like different things, and she created these like wild styles just from like gluing from. And when she did it, she was getting attacked online. Like people were like, "This is so ghetto. This is so." You know how it is. You know how it is. She's like a black. She's
Yes.
a phenotype. She looks like black. Everything. So you know she's gonna get attacked for it, and she has alopecia. And now I'm seeing people sell this like fake lace front
Oh yeah, the
baby
little
hair.
baby hairs.
Yes, that you can like glue. And I'm like, and the comments are like people are like really encouraging. And I'm like, but when it was like affecting somebody who literally had like a disability, it
Yeah.
was like you guys were not there. You were like, this is very stupid. But now that it's to garnish what
Hmm.
people already like what people are wanting in this desirable way, like suddenly I'm seeing that as like normal and innovative.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much to be said about like folks without desirability innovating beauty.
That's it. That's what I was trying to say. You just like perfectly summed that. Yes. Yes.
Like, yeah,
Yes.
they're creative. Like, I'm sure at the, I mean, we have to go back to Madam CJ Walker and just pull so much stuff. But like, yeah, people who lack desirability definitely innovate a lot of our beauty practices.
Yeah,
Period. I'll
that have
just
been
stop there.
around.
Mhm,
Yeah.
absolutely. But I'm glad we got this on the doc
Me too.
because again, the knowledge building is just so tasty.
I've
Like
said so much and like
counter
we
narratives,
yes.
the counter narrative of it all. Like I'm so grateful for you. I just know it's going to be I just hope you have a hard drive.
I do, yes. I mean,
Great.
so it's gonna save it onto the StreamYard. Yeah,
I mean
I
in
do.
life with all your work.
Oh, sorry.
I just hope
Yes.
you understand that like the archival practice of your
Mm,
existence, your time here
archiving.
on this planet is going to be critical. It's going to be
Thank
very
you,
critical. But
Amber.
also you don't have to I feel like sometimes when black folks are brilliant like this, especially black femmes, like people automatically imagine you did and then the work that will be done around that, but like I'm glad you are here kicking and screaming.
Thank you.
This
And
was
same to
so fun.
you.
Thank you for
I
like
know.
pulling me out to do this. Like I feel so encouraged and just like I sometimes get triggered around this conversation and now I just
Mhm.
don't because it's easier having it with someone who's not gaslighting you while you're doing it.
That part, that part, that part. Thank you so much.
Thank
I'm
you.
gonna end the stream.
Great.
1 minute and recording.